24. Amir. Utopia's AC was like peroxide on my wounds. Marlon looked up from his book and his mouth fell open. What the fuck happened to you? I don't want to talk about it. I'd gone to a clinic and gotten 13 stitches in my brow. My eye was almost totally swollen shut. I told you not to fuck with that guy. Dude is the worst and something else. I don't want to talk about it. You need a real fucking job. Marlon, I make more money than you do. Yeah, but Jer isn't gonna stomp my ass if I fuck up. It's illegal for him to do so. I was about to walk out. I'm your friend. Talk to me, man. I told him the whole thing. So Tyler's really not going to hand over this stuff. Tyler basically isn't even there anymore. You've seen him. Probably doesn't even remember where he stashed it. Jared stepped out from the back. His cracked red eyes went live. Jesus Christ, what the hell happened to you? I don't want to talk about it. There's no way in hell you're just going to sit there with that fucking face and not tell me about it. Jesus. Our boy needs a real job, Marlon said. You want me to talk to my guy at the dog track? I think he needs a guy like ASAP. I felt like I was going to cave in. I don't know. I'm leaving. I'm just leaving. I went outside, got on my bike and pedaled on. The sun was like a million glass pins on my cuts and bruises. The wind cut through my frame, and I'd blink and imagine I was falling from a neon Tokyo skyscraper. Geese honked ragged overhead as I rolled into the apartment parking lot. I locked up my bike, went up the front steps, unlocked and opened the door. I started to drown. It was an orange extension cord, strung up from the second floor banister, drawn tight down in a straight line. His shape floated beneath it, toes inches from the ground, a knocked over stepladder. Distended face, bloated tongue pushed through puffy lips, eyes frozen on me, the front of his pants all wet and foul. The brick of whirl lay on the floor before him, a lake of black piss gently ebbing toward it. By the time we were 12 years old, we'd already shared a lifetime together, hand in hand, colonizing the town's hidden places, building new realities with only our shared imaginations and veils pulled over the mundane. A branch became a sword, a burnt-down cabin became a witch's house, slurred syllables became sacred incantations. We learned each other's internal lives, became scholars of them, our wet dreams and first futile crushes, wings pulled from butterflies, leg from spiders, and all the other shameful cruelty that causes children to first grasp mortality, and morals. Even now, I won't repeat what he told me. At the height of the final summer before high school, we stole red wine from his mother and guzzled it on the old playground, tossing the bottles onto concrete, watching them smash and shimmer in the moon's pale light. We stripped off our clothes and ran howling through the roiling night until our bodies collided, wrapping limbs around one another, pulling tight, pressing lips, becoming irreversibly entangled. The world, and my life inside it, shifted ever further toward him, a new veil thrown over everything I once assumed was true. My fingers pushed through his stiff, sullied hair, and we exchanged fresh admissions and promises beneath an alien dawn. We would always be together and know each other's secrets. I snatched the brick from the floor and ran upstairs. I gathered up all the drugs, wrapping them in an old shirt and stuffing them in my backpack. I went to his room. Nothing had changed since Chucky had trashed it, except for a white envelope laid on his desk. I picked it up, it felt like a knife, and folded it into my back pocket. I tore out his closet and bed until I found them, the notebooks from his mom's storage unit. I stuffed them in the backpack and went back downstairs, trying to keep my eyes off him but failing, the way his face bloated into a mocking pout, aging him forward into a hideous future he'd never lived to see. I slipped through the front door, letting it click shut behind me, and called Marlon. "What do you mean?" he said. "I mean he did it. He's gone." "What do you mean?" But I knew he knew, and went all quiet. "Fucking asshole," he whispered, already crying. "Not you, I mean." I asked if he wanted to meet up, and he said yeah. I biked out to the playground. He was already there, sitting on a turquoise plastic bubble, smoking. "Hey." He looked up. The cigarette fell from his hand. "Hey." He asked if I called the cops, and I told him not yet. I didn't tell him about the envelope. We smoked and didn't talk much. Marlon cried some more and I didn't. I'm not sure I felt anything. Tyler had been dead long before today. longer than either of us were willing to admit. We smoked weed and cigarettes. I ate some pills and we walked in circles around the playground's perimeter until it got dark, then real dark. I tossed the drugs and brick of whirl under the plastic bubble and texted Chucky, telling him where to find it. I stopped by Mom's place, stashed the backpack in the garage, then biked back to the apartment and called 911. Jill. I knew even before Marlon texted me. Something in my chest, something substantial, like an organ, clenched, withered, and faded. When my phone buzzed and I saw the message, I nearly snapped it in half. Snow fell hard in nebulous clumps. I went out into the cold and paid a homeless man to buy me a bottle of Maker's Mark. He asked if he could come home with me, said he had no place to go, and I even considered it for a second, but said no, even though he was probably going to die out there. I got back to the dorm and drank straight from the bottle until it was almost gone. I let myself break, crying and puking and pissing and shitting myself on the floor until there was nothing in my stomach but acid, and my skin went red with caked rash. The next day I called Lou. "I'm so sorry," she said, sounding confused. "I had no idea." "I know," I said. "Thank you." A long, pregnant silence, then quietly, "You're okay. You're okay. You're going to be okay." Lou. It'd been years since I'd heard from her. I was surprised she was so upset, thinking there had been enough distance between them. Mostly I was surprised Tyler had lived as long as he had. Amir. I tried to picture what it was like, or maybe I didn't need to. Maybe it just seeped through me. His morning. Choosing his clothes, smoking, details missing, just like with actual memories. The songs he listened to, the hole he dug the whirl brick out of, his dreams the night before. I filled them in myself. He chooses what he'll use. You can hang yourself with so many things: shoelaces, a clothes hanger, a long-sleeve shirt. He picks an orange extension cord, and this should be a gap in my understanding, but I know why he picked that. He knew it'd remind me of the 2 summers before, outside the bowling alley, our first dangling boy, a message only I would recognize, but never decipher. Jill. The world had been emptied, all space, no footing or oxygen left. I'm not even here. I was only here a long time ago, when there was still blood and stars and buildings, eyes that could see and insects with barbed ends, the stench of shit and rot, and the wind roaring in your ears to remind you you're falling. Serpents beneath the mud in slumber, and names you could give to things. All that was so long ago, and I will never be, and will never be again. I woke, my stomach clenched and twisted, and yellow fluid pushed up my throat, into my sinuses, and out my lips, onto my comforter. My waist was soaked through cold with salty orange piss. Tilly stood in the doorway, shrieking, "What the fuck? What the fuck is wrong with you?" I puked again and got up, pushing Tilly out of my senses as she followed me, still screaming. I walked out to the showers, got in a stall fully clothed, and let the lukewarm water pour over me. Bile dripped down to my crotch, mixing with the piss and period blood, all washing down my thighs and knees to my feet and down the drain. I shut the water off and lay down in the stall and let myself dry until I was only damp. I got up and walked back down the hall. A woman opened the door from the stairwell and stepped through. Maddie. As her eyes found me, her smile slowly melted away. Lou. I found out about Jill decades after she'd gone, from a website on New England hauntings. They called her the Candle Girl. They said she died in the morning, and that's what latched her to Kinsfield. Some people wrote that if you went to a particular roadside in the outskirts and lit a candle, she'd appear briefly, floating above the grass, before snuffing the candle out. There was a time I wanted to go back there, but not anymore. Amir. Less than a dozen people came to the funeral. The only ones I knew were Marlon and Tyler's mom, who, when she saw me, wrapped me tight in her arms and pressed her cheek into mine. "We were so good to him," she said. "This is exactly what he would have wanted." Her eyes were dry, but she kept wiping them as though she'd been crying. The pastor said that we all honored him by being there, that we honored him by fulfilling his final requests. That was a lie. He never wanted to be buried. He wanted me to throw him in the river. The only way he'd finally be able to sleep and be forgotten. None of this was for him. As everyone left for the procession, I told Marlin I had to use the bathroom. I exited through a side door into a high golden light and walked back to Mom's place. No one was home. I got my bag from the garage, packed some clothes and the rest of my money, and biked down to the Greyhound station.
"25. Jill." Maddie got my toiletries and led me back to the showers. She stripped off my clothes and soaped me up. "What happened?" she said. "He's gone." "Who's gone?" I said his name. He had part of me, and now that's gone too. She held my sticky, gross skin and let me cry into her neck. "You're still here," she said. She dried me off, and we headed back to my room. The door was locked, and all my stuff was tossed into the hall. I took off my towel right there, ignoring the guy staring at me, and put on some tights and a hoodie. We gathered up what we could and walked it over to Maddie's dorm. Amir. The bus pulled into the Spokane station around dawn. Marcus had been right. Washington felt like New Hampshire, but more so. Dead little suburb stretching on forever. I looked him up in my phone and gave him a call. "Hey man, I was just thinking about you. What's good?" "I'm alright," I said. "Remember when you said I could crash with you if I was in the area?" "Yeah, brother, of course. When are you thinking of coming up?" I told him. His voice changed. He said he'd pick me up. He cringed when he saw my face. "Shit, what happened to you?" "I don't want to talk about it." He said he was happy to see me, even though he frowned a whole lot. His place was a lot smaller than I'd pictured it. I thought he'd been making all the money with his work. He put me up in a tiny room that may have once been a walk-in closet. We were eating lunch and I was spacing out, dropping pieces of the conversation before snapping back. "So what happened?" he asked. "Nothing." "Look, I'm not gonna say you've got to talk to me, but it's good to talk things through sometimes. I know some folks you could talk to." I shook my head. "There's nothing." The next morning he asked me what my timeline was. I told him I didn't know. I looked up at a photo of some mountains he had framed, and I cried in his lap for like an hour. He said that if I didn't mind the tiny room, he didn't mind keeping me. He brought me out his glass and stone ring, and we took massive dabs and watched a movie about teenage wizards fighting cops. Lou. You don't need to know the rest of my life. It's unimportant. A life can be long. I read books. I ate food. I worked in Max's bookstore. I hummed in a dark corner when Max was asleep, deep under my breath. I hummed for Arnie and I hummed for Jill. Every night, then every other night, then maybe a couple times a week. I'd pull my legs and sometimes I'd see their faces. I'd pull between my legs and sometimes I'd see their faces, raveling as a flush of strings. Years later, maybe, they ceased to manifest. I didn't see Jill for many years, and I never saw Arnie again. Amir. Marcus said he could get me a job at his work. It's not the most glamorous gig, but you'd be getting your foot in the door. 30 hours a week, minimum wage. I made myself smile and say, "Okay." I asked what the company did. He inhaled deep. "It's an integrated grief strategy service. You'll be starting in notifications. It ain't pretty, but if you do good, you can get into the intake. They'll tell you all about it down there." The interview was clearly a formality because they put me on the floor dialing that night. Tina was my orientation coach. "You're going to hear a lot of crying tonight," she said. "Just push through and deliver the message." "So, is this like a funeral home?" I said. Tina got real quiet. "While some of the Gentle's Rest services may parallel those provided by funeral homes, the majority of our activities are wholly separate. Therefore, Gentle Rest cannot be officially classified as a funeral home." "Okay." She led me to my station, one in a long line of gray cubbies. The computer was new, but the phone was a decade old. I don't think I'd ever seen a landline before. "If you want a headset, you can get one from Best Buy pretty cheap." "Okay." I put the phone in the crook of my neck and ran the auto dialer. Most of my shift I didn't speak to anyone. That was good. The people I did reach were more or less the same. "Put Tracy on the phone," one man bellowed. His name was Patrick Denny. He had just lost his cousin Rochelle. "Sir, Tracy Adel contacted us to contact you. She isn't here with us, but I can answer any questions. Put her on the goddamn line. Put her on the goddamn line or I'm reporting you." "Sir, I wish I could do that, but Tracy isn't here." Tina strode down the row of call stations toward me. "Wrap it up," she hissed, spinning her index finger at each other. "Deliver the message and move on." "If you don't put Tracy on right now, you son of a bitch, I'm calling the FCC. I breathed deep. "Sir, I'm required to read this," and I ran through it like it was all one word. "Tracy Attell regrets to inform you for..." Okay, this is a clusterfuck of words. I'm just not going to read all this. "Now hang up," Tina said. I hung up. "There, that's it. Just plow through the script and get out of there. You don't want to try talking to these people. Now get your numbers up." That became my life. Jill. I moved into Maddie's room. It was almost like a home. Every morning we'd go down and eat breakfast at the food commons. We'd walk each other to class, sharing and sneaking cigarettes. We'd get high and massage each other's backs and watch amateur science videos on YouTube. We'd drop acid and go to the movies or finger each other in the back of punk shows. We'd hold each other in front of our altars, caressing between each other's legs, humming gently in each other's ears, watching a tiny rabbit dance with a tiny dog atop her dresser. Lou. A man came into Max's bookstore. He said his name was Eugene and that he'd been looking for me, that he'd known me before. Nothing familiar about him. He said that was okay, that I wouldn't recognize him. He asked if I wanted to come dancing. I took his number and said yes. I met him at a club called Machine, and even though I sweated all night, it didn't bother me. That night we touched and rubbed and sucked, and I lit 3 candles and showed him how to hum. He whispered my name and the strings washed between us. He told me an awful story he had lived through, and he quaked and went wet in the rest of the night as I held him. We'd meet 3 times a week, building a shrine at his apartment together. Bundles of peony, rowan leaves, and persimmon. The slice of honeycomb I'd brought from Kingsfield, a lobster claw he'd found on the beach. We'd read books and play to each other, changing our voices to fit the characters, becoming whalers and drug addicts and witches. We'd hum and harmonize, licking salty flesh and pearl, going wet and offering secrets. He named me his caretaker. I moved into his apartment, and we held each other for years, feeling each other's bodies soften and warp. Amir. Marcia Martinez covered her headset and yelled over to the supervisor desk. "This guy is talking in Hebrew or something. I don't speak that." She was 50-something and enormous and beautiful, and I had a weird little crush on her. Matthew, a supervisor who sold me weed and Xanax, yelled back, "Just deliver the message." She sped through it, hung up, and turned to the guy beside her. "You Jewish?" "Yeah," the kid said. "So what? They cut your little pee-pee tip off?" I laughed, or I thought I did, but my body was too numb for it to manifest. Regardless, when I saw the look on the kid's face, I felt a pit of guilt, even though he couldn't have known what was happening inside me. Mom called every day, then every other day, then every week, etc. I couldn't pick up. If I talked to her, she'd ask me how I was doing, and everything would become real again, and I didn't know how to go back to that. Jill. The semester wound down, and I actually did pretty decent in all my classes. Maddie said that it was our ritual. The more you give it, the more it gives back. Like that. I was helping her pack when she pitched it. "I want you to come home with me for summer. I want you to meet my family." I wrapped my arms around my stomach. "You'll get sick of me." "I'm not going to get sick of you. I'm going to get sick of not seeing you." "I don't know." She put her wrist around my neck and looked me in the eyes. "Trust me, please." "Okay." I pressed my forehead against hers. "Yeah, I'll come." Lou. My hair stained gray. My skin cracked into miniature valleys. I changed so slowly I didn't even see it happening. Always dying, becoming who I needed to be. The future pushed forward. Max went frail and splintered and perished. He went to sleep and stopped breathing. I took over his shop with his boyfriend. until he went frail and splintered and perished. Then it was me and Eugene, until he went frail and splintered and perished. The polar bears went extinct. East Boston sunk beneath the ocean. The West Coast burned to cinder. Thousands died in a tube shot through space, floating frozen and static forever. I'm still here for some time. Amir. Eddie Gorin always got sat next to me, a huge and quiet guy, always dragging this big black gym bag around with him. One time, I showed up to my shift and his bag was behind my chair. I started moving it, heavy, like it was full of pipes or books. He came up behind me and grabbed my wrist. You touching my bag? I was just moving it. He let go. Don't touch my fucking bag. He stared me down all through the rest of the shift. The next week he was gone. Police came through, asking about him. Apparently, he'd beaten a guy to death with a hammer. We never saw him again. Jill. The drive wasn't anything special. I realized state borders were arbitrary, just identical towns, identical cities, identical plains, identical mountains, alternating like a strobe. New York could have been Massachusetts, Pennsylvania could have been New Hampshire. But it was nice. We listened to a podcast about 19th century whaling. We sang along to classic rock. She told me about her family, her 7 brothers and sisters, her hippie parents, her witchy grandma. We passed by barns with big pastel flowers painted on the side. Those are hexes, Maddie said, pointing, protective sigils. Most signs of civilization fell away into rolling pastures and rocky meadows. The sun fell behind the horizon. With no street lamps, I could only see the space immediately before us, a dull orange glow far ahead. My heart pounded up against my ribs. Maddie ran her hand up my knee and twined her fingers through mine. We're here. She turned off the stereo. Over the car's exhaust, I could still hear music. We rolled up to a large bonfire in front of a monstrous, peeling farmhouse. 10 figures stood around the flame, some playing guitars, other fiddles and washboards. Everyone looked toward us, grinning wide, the fire shimmering off their skin. She parked and killed the engine. We got out. A woman with thick tan wrinkles and bright pink hair rushed us, sweeping Maddie up in her arms. My God, it's been so long. Too long. Maddie laughed. It's been like 2 months. 2 months is too long. She turned to me. And you must be Jill. She pulled me in close. Her skin smelled like red wine and lilacs. I've heard so much about you. A man with a gray billy goat beard came up behind us. He puffed on a long bent joint and handed it to me. Welcome, he said, winking. We sat down on the hay bales in front of the fires, listening to music echoing through the hills. Maddie's parents shot me a barrage of pleasant questions until Maddie made them stop. I felt like I'd been there before, in a dream or before I was born. It felt like home, a real home. Better than home, maybe. We watched the fire until it died to black embers, and Maddie and I fell asleep in the grass, wrapped in each other's arms. Amir. I finally sifted through Tyler's dad's notebooks, cracking one open in the middle. April 16th, 93. Tade Tinian suicide. Hanging. Visited location. Took grass from the site. Ritual in basement. 1:25 a.m. Burned 3 offerings. 1 tab LSD. Unknown dosage. Sense of paranoia and physical tremors, but no confirmable contact. April 19th, 93. Wade Tinian's funeral at Hillside Cemetery, 3:05 a.m. Burned 3 offerings, 300 milligrams mescaline at gravesite. No confirmable contact, but a hell of a time. Maybe too nervous about being caught. April 22nd, 93. Ritual in basement, 2 a.m. Burned 3 offerings, 300 milligrams mescaline, 3-day fast. Nothing like the second ritual. Visuals in the dark, movement, light trails, something else too, because of noise upstairs. July 22nd, 93. Jerry Buck suicide, hanging, visited location, collected pussy willows from the area, ritual in basement, 2:50 a.m. Burned 3 offerings, paper circles and plants, 300 milligrams mescaline, light visuals but no sense of contact. I flipped further. November 1st, 94? Alice talked about snow on the ground. There are only leaves. Said Christmas was next week. Yesterday was Halloween. Calendar still says 94, so I'm not too far out. Might change tomorrow. November 2nd, 94. Now there's snow. Stores have Christmas decor up. I caught up. Ritual in basement. 3:13 a.m. Burned one offering. 1 tab of LSD. Could feel my fingers stripping apart into smaller and smaller pieces, like thin black hair. Closed my eyes and saw a pile of baby bluebirds crawling on top of each other, gasping for air. Couldn't sleep until late morning. Alice seems upset. November 4th, 94? House is completely different. Alice looks years older. Tyler in early teens, maybe. They look sick. Tried talking to them, but they act like I'm not here. They just stand there. Nothing has any substance. Try to touch a wall and my hand goes right through. I opened another notebook. I nearly dropped it. A page covered with squiggly lines and veins. A simple drawing of a loop with 3 circles resting at the bottom. A spiral filled with spirals. A tracing of a hand. His hand. Name of the world. Name of the lost. My hand. His name. His son's words and drawings, but from over a decade earlier, in his own handwriting. I clapped the book shut and thought about burning them. I took Tyler's envelope in both hands. I pressed my thumbs up through the seam and let the seal tear, working my nails slowly across. I breathed in, slipped out a piece of paper and unfolding it. Slipping out a piece of paper and unfolding it. Familiar chicken scratch handwriting. I see you, it read. Jill. She took me to the pasture and let me milk a mammoth brown cow. She taught me how to drive a tractor. We rode horses through the woods. We smoked weed on the roof and pointed out clouds that looked like penises. We fed tiny chunks of raw chicken to her brother's Venus flytrap. We fucked each other with fresh-picked ears of corn. We built a fire under a billion stars and told ghost stories. We took bets to see how many cigarette butts the rooster would eat. We let the goats hop on top of our backs and nibble our hair. We built an altar of stones, sticks, and berries at the top of a hill, and when we hummed, a family of deer came to us, licking our palms and nuzzling our cheeks. We bathed in streams and made bread from scratch. We pulled ticks and leeches off each other's backs. We wrote rap songs about farm life and smoking meth. We stayed up the whole night watching movies about vampires and warlocks. We left clumps of hair, string, and silver buttons for a family of crows. When it stormed for 3 days and we lost power, I rocked her gently in the dark and told her I loved her. Amir. Tasha had been calling 3 times a day for a week straight. Thursday night I finally answered. Didn't think you'd ever pick up. Her voice was flattened, distant, alien. Hey. Long silence. Been meaning to call. You need to come home. I rolled my eyes. You need to come home. No, you need to come home. Her voice was wrong and stilted, like a recording that'd been chopped up. Mom's sick. It's bad. You need to come home. She's sick? Yes. I squeezed the phone hard. Put her on. Pregnant silence. I can't. Put her on. But I hung up before she could answer. I punched the wall until the plaster caved. Then I got on Marcus's laptop and ordered a plane ticket with his debit card info. Jill. September came too fast. I wanted to live out there with Maddie and her family forever. It was the only world I ever wanted. Well, you can come back for Thanksgiving, and Christmas, and next summer, Maddie said. I'm glad you liked it so much, but I think it's good to have time to miss things too. I thought about the campus of cold gray towers and tiny box rooms with bad circulation. I've been wanting to ask you something, Maddie said. Yeah? I want to see where you grew up. That's not a question. Can we go? I assure you it's not nearly as cool as here. I don't care. I want to know where you came from. I want to know that about you. Maybe. Someday. Okay, hear me out. Kinsfield is only like 2 hours from school, right? Yeah. How about we just go up there before we go back, stay the night in some fun, scuzzy motel, and just make a day of it? and head back to campus that night? I don't know. Please? She nudged her forehead into my shoulder. I'll give you so much head, like all the head. I laughed. Why does it matter to you so much? Because I love you, and I want to know everything about you, even the stuff that ain't pretty. Her pupils almost seemed ringed with gold. Okay, I said. Yeah? Yeah. She smiled huge and pulled me in. I love you. I love you. I love you.